Are we live? Yeah. You guys see it, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So, welcome everyone who's watching, who's gonna watch the recording. Thank you all for being here. This is a very exciting one today. One of my favorite topics to dive into recently. So, this one is all about comedy and how it applies to our life. And we have Harpreet, who I had no idea was into comedy, and he's been into comedy for a long time. We have Charlie and Viki with us, who, well, actually, guys, I'm gonna let you tell us who you are, what you do, and what is Playface, and then Harpreet will go to you as well. Yeah,
Do you
go
wanna
for it,
Yeah,
guys.
I'll start us in. So hi, Charlie, Vicky. I've been doing improv comedy for about 10 years or so, and started doing more and more comedy, finding the world of clown, alternative comedy, sketch, stand-up. And eventually, last year, me and Vicky decided to quit all our day jobs as software development and marketing, social media, and work full-time running a comedy company, teaching comedy, putting on comedy shows, also working with mindfulness and taking the lessons you can get from theatre, drama, comedy, and applying those to self-development and mindfulness.
Pretty much what Charlie said. I'm also a happiness facilitator as well. So that's really fed into the kind of mindfulness side of things, and the idea that I've got so much. We've got so much joy out of improv, and it's kind of bringing that to people that don't necessarily want to be on stage but can still experience that joy as well.
Okay, amazing. Thank you, Harpreet. Tell me, how did you end up in comedy before, or was it before business or after business? What happened? How are you here?
Yeah, so I'm a personal development geek. So I've done personal development for about 15 years or so. And then I just happened to stumble across improv. I went to a place called the Museum of Happiness, and there was a mindfulness and improv session. So it was part mindfulness and part improv comedy. And I was like, what the hell? I'm going to give this a go. I love new experiences. Let's try something new. And it was the most crazy experience when you do your first improv class. It's the most crazy and fun and weird and mindful and present experience. And I just came away just feeling so connected to my inner child, who I probably had repressed for years and years and years, and just felt so happy. And I felt so much like serotonin and happiness and joy and expressiveness. That I just wanted everyone to do that, and so I continued that. So it's been about 6 years doing comedy, performing with Charlie and Vicky, and yeah, just love it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Amazing. So, my question to you guys to begin with is, what was the turning point for you? Like, when did you decide it's like, okay, now I got to move full time in comedy, or now I got to take it seriously for you, Harpreet? Like, let's start with you. So, when was the times like, okay, I've had this experience, it's good, but there's a difference between you liking something and then liking something and committing it to it for 6 years. So, what made you commit? What made you go there?
Yeah, so I think we generally do something due to an emotion, like we either feel good about doing something or we feel bad. There's like that pain and pleasure.
Yeah.
And I just felt so happy going to all these improv comedy classes. I just would leave feeling invigorated, so happy. I'd wake up the next morning full of energy. I would laugh so much. You laugh so much during the classes. And it's just like, instead of going home after a busy day at work and watching comedy for 30 minutes, I would be in a class for 3 hours, just cracking up and laughing. And then people were laughing at some of the stuff that I was doing. And I was like, okay, that's quite cool as well. So it just became like this thing that made me feel good. So I just kept attending workshops, courses, classes. I then put my name in the hat to join like a kind of a team, which I joined. That was for 4 years. They dissolved now, but then I joined another team, which Charlie and Vicky's in. And it's just this kind of like thing, which once you try comedy, or the type of comedy that I do, which is improv comedy, which is kind of like that stuff that don't know if you ever watched Whose Line Is It Anyway? That kind of American or British show. So that's the kind of the comedy I do is improv, whereas Charlie and Viki do a few different varieties of comedy. It just becomes just so much fun, and for me, I just get to tap into that playfulness so much that it's helped me as a public speaker, a motivational speaker, and in my business, it helps me, to bring in play, to bring in joy, to bring in creativity in my daily life as well now. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'm gonna tap into that later on. But Charlie and Viki, let's hear from you. So, what was the turning point for you? So, how do you go from being this into software and digital media, and how do you find comedy, and why switch to it long term? What happened there?
Cool. So, I started doing improv about a year later than Charlie, and being like, oh, that sounds really scary. And yeah, so from my first class, I was kind of hooked into it. I was thinking like, oh, you're making me able to speak more exactly like Harpreet was saying in terms of like speaking out in like whereas at work, kind of pitch meetings, big company meetings and everything like that, and having the confidence. I used to be a very, very shy person, and it kind of bled throughout my life of just making me kind of happier, and just feeling more positive towards things. And it was last year I was on a retreat that wasn't it was the best thing for me at the time, but it wasn't necessarily as well managed as I would like it to have been. And I was thinking, I want to hold space for people. I want to help people, and I want to kind of show them that they can have all of these wonderful things and that I've experienced. So that's where Playface kind of started from. I was sat on a beach in Mexico thinking, I want to do something with people. And meanwhile, Charlie was on the other side of the world, also thinking the same thing.
Whilst I was in Paris studying clown under a French master, Philippe Gaulier, being like, this is so brutal and tricky, but I kind of love it. Let's bring this to the world somehow.
Yeah. And I think it's... as Harpreet touched on, we do the different kind of types of comedy. So you feel like you're kind of learning new things from the different types that you do. So I really enjoy emceeing. It brings a lot of kind of analysis and problem solving, and what does the night need? What does the kind of energy of the room, does that need to come up? Does that need to come down? And how can I bring it there? So it's kind of constantly gifting things to people around. So I've definitely got my holding space for people thing.
Yeah, for me, I really resonate with a lot of what Harpreet was saying. It's like I never did drama, comedy, or anything like that before starting a class when I was in my early 20s and stuff. And I was doing it to try and get better at like public speaking and confidence and stuff, because I was working in startups at the time. But immediately just fell in love with the positivity, the collaboration, the creativity that everyone gets in an improv comedy class when you're working and building together. And suddenly, like from doing 8-9 hour days of programming, being very focused, going to do a 3-hour class in the evening didn't feel draining. It felt exciting and energetic and joyful. And then after a few years pass and you look back and you're like, wow, I'm doing like 10 hours a week of this outside of work. And it's like, this is upgraded from like just a casual hobby to something that's really, really fun. And I think for me, a turning point that led into us going full-time into comedy happened after COVID, where it became very difficult to do as much improv comedy. There was a lot of stuff online, but I think I'm very physical performer. I think you're quite a physical performer, and spending all day on the computer programming, it wasn't the same trying to do it online. And I noticed myself becoming what I would consider like a worse version of myself, or at least a less enjoyable version of myself. And I was attributing it mainly to the lack of doing improv comedy and connecting and building from that. Obviously, COVID is bad in a whole bunch of different ways. There's probably some subtle effects of that, or not so subtle effects of that as well. But I really do think that a lot of it was the lack of improv specifically that made me realize oh, I really need this in my life to become the kind of person I want to be, to become more compassionate, more empathetic, understand people better, and just laugh more. So I think after that, it started becoming quite quick decision of going freelance and contracting in programming, doing less of our day jobs, less of that, and more comedy, and teaching with other schools and stuff until we realized, oh, we can do this all ourselves.
Interesting. So one thing that I'm very curious about now that you said all of that is you spoke about empathy and knowing people better through doing this work. How does that work? How do you empathize and know people better through improv and comedy? How does that work?
Yes. So one through so this is specific to improvised comedy or comedy where you're playing characters and stuff like that. So you're acting. You have to wear many hats. You have to put yourself in the mind of these characters that you're trying to portray. When you do classes, workshops that focus on characters, or long classes that focus on characters, you're trying to act in different emotions. You're trying to act as different people from your lives and try and do the actions that you think they would do, being put in these sometimes bizarre or unusual situations, as a way of finding more interesting characters, mainly for comedy purposes. Although a lot of improv theatre doesn't have to be for comedy. Some of the best scenes I've ever seen are the ones that bring you to tears because they're so moving and dramatic. And to get to a point where you can create scenes like that, you often want to be able to play different characters, and to play different characters in better ways, you're going to want to understand those points of views and stuff better. So there's many kinds of exercises that help us get into and understand these different points of views. And then I feel like that slips and seeps out into the real world a bit more, because a lot of kind of acting work in trying to take in and be another character is about observing others' behaviors and understanding other people. So to get better at that yourself, you start becoming more observant, and mixed in with the lessons in listening and stuff in improv, which you have to be very, very good at listening to be able to build scenes together. When you bring that into your real life, you end up just really paying attention to other people, trying to understand their points of views better. And yeah, that directly comes from the training you get from improv comedy.
Oh, sounds amazing. Harpreet, do you have any inputs as well?
I agree with all the above. And yeah, there's some core kind of premises that we have in improv. So one of them is that we always yes and everything. So if Charlie was to say something like, "Oh, it's a really beautiful blue sky today," I'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's really beautiful blue sky, and that makes me feel happy today." So there's these real amazing qualities of yes and, of active listening, of being seeing life through a different character. I remember one scene where an exercise where we had to be a character which was the complete opposite to ourselves, and I turned into like this crazy, angry, loud, like drug dealing type person, which is completely opposite of me. And so you're seeing the world through different characters, different perspectives. And also relate to something that I think Viki said earlier on, that I remember my second ever improv class after that mindfulness kind of improv one. There was 20 people around the circle, and the teacher went round every single person and asked them, so why are you here? Like, what's your why? What's your reason for being here? And almost everyone said a similar thing. It was like, I'm a bit shy, and I just want to work on my confidence, or I don't know how to express myself, or so many people were coming in for a sense of personal development or expression or confidence or relieving anxiety. It was really magical to see that, almost like 15 out of those 20 people were here for a similar reason. Yeah.
Wow. So before I move on to the next thing, I do want to say, people watching, feel free to drop us a message, share what you're thinking. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. We've got a comment over here from Eileen. She says, observe the obvious. And so observe the obvious, guys, is a bit of a thing that we use in our trainings, in our personal development thing. But from just this sentence, observe the obvious, what do you guys think about it? What do you guys pick up about it?
So this takes me back to a workshop we were doing where we were talking about a martini wizard. That if you're kind of doing something in improv and something crazy happens, like a wizard jumps out of a martini glass, I think this was, don't ignore it. Don't ignore the elephant in the room. Don't be like, look at this. And that will take you on a journey. So if you're kind of just seeing what's going on around you and be like, oh, I'm going to react to that, then that's kind of a nice way to kind of think about things. So don't kind of dull things down, or don't kind of push things out the way because it might be kind of difficult or strange to handle because you're kind of going down your route already. Like, always look at the shiny thing.
It also makes me think it's a core characteristic in improv that we teach very early on, which is just say the obvious thing. Don't try and be clever. We often say you don't try and be clever. Don't try and be funny. Just be obvious and clear. Because one of the beauties of improv is that a lot of the humor and the surprise comes out of mistakes we make. If we try and be clever and funny, it often ends up as not clever or funny, and it can be the end of a scene. You can say something that sounds like a punchline, but it doesn't quite work, and it breaks the scene a bit. Whereas when we just say the most obvious things, people end up delighted. The audience delights when we say simple things sometimes. Like, I had a level 1 class yesterday, week 2, level 1, that I was teaching, and someone was coming up with a name and it was like, have you met my brother, Mark? And it's like, it's not a funny name, but it was so funny in the room because the audience know his brain was panicking. They were trying to think through clever or interesting names. He just said Mark in the end, and it's just a very usual, normal name, but it was really funny and satisfying in that context. So just being obvious and saying the simple and clear things in the context of improv and stuff, and I think a lot in life as well, is great. It's all you need. We don't need to be thinking of wild and wacky things all the time.
All right, that is pretty crazy for me too. It's like, okay, don't try to be funny if you want to be funny.
Yeah.
Because so in one of our trainings, and Harpreet will know this. So one of the things that we do is we teach intuition, and we teach how to read people from the sort of subtle cues that they give by just being themselves. And one of the techniques that we use to get there in terms of being comfortable with letting our voice do the job for us is we do this sort of, I guess it's an improv exercise where we just start talking and we say, and we pass it on to the next person to continue the story, and we keep going in circles till we're told to stop. And the thing is, we don't get time to think. We don't get time to be clever. It's just, and then it's on you, and then you just got to start talking at the time. And one thing I learned was you can't plan for it. You really can't think of what you're going to say next. You just have to let it out. And for me, when I did that, when I did well on the exercise, was when I was just saying the next thing that was on my mouth rather than trying to, make a clever story out of it. So that is very cool to hear and understand. It's like, because for me, what that does is it makes it a bit effortless. It doesn't require you to be intelligent or smart or someone, be someone that is beyond who you are. So that is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And
I think one of the big secrets with some like improv comedy, or not a secret, it's a misconception, is that so many people think you have to be quick, you have to be funny, you have to be confident. I could never be that big, bold, or brave, or funny on stage. And they're pretty much all the opposite of the things we try and teach and train people. Where we want people to get on stage, just say the obvious thing or whatever they have in their head. And if that's nothing as well, then that's great. That's already a character choice. Most people speak too much in improv scenes and don't give enough silence. when students come and they kind of freeze up or act a bit awkward on stage because they're maybe in front of the class for the first time, that's a character, and that character can be really interesting and really funny and is really relatable, because everyone in the audience, a lot of people in the audience are thinking the same thing of, oh, I might act like that if I was in that situation. So then when someone comes in and breaks that tension or just interacts with that character, it's delightful to see. And then it gives the performer on stage who is genuinely acting a bit shy or unconfident, not knowing what to say, it gives them the confidence, because they're like, oh, it's okay to be like this, to be vulnerable, to be who I am, which right now is someone who's not entirely sure what to say or what to do. That's okay. And this is working on stage. People are actually enjoying this, even though I'm doing nothing. And it's beautiful to see that when it starts clicking in students' heads.
Oh, that is so cool. Because I completely thought the opposite, obviously, because I haven't, ever been in that world. But shit, that's cool, because one of the biggest principles that I teach, and Harpreet also does, I'm sure, is that you don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to change anything about yourself to be who you want to be, to get where you want to get. As you are is great. And for me, this I relate to this in that way. So one question does come here, because it's like, okay, you can be awkward, you can have those things, and it works, but what happens when it doesn't work? Because I'm sure there's times where it doesn't work. So how do you deal with that, where you can obviously see that the crowd is not getting it, or they're not laughing, or it's the energy is just going down? Because I've been to a few comedy shows. I wouldn't say recently, but last time when I was in London, I went to this secret comedy club, and people come in to experiment, to try out, and some of them were just trash. Sorry to say, but it was just bad, and they were just bombing it. And the one thing as an audience I felt was a complete disconnect. It was like as if they were not doing it with me, they were not involved with me. So my question is, have you experienced that, first of all, and how often does that happen to you guys? And then how do you deal with it? How do you go beyond that? How do you transform that? How do you change it? Can it be changed? Can it be saved? So yeah, share your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Anyone start? Yeah.
So I did a stand-up course last year. I did it because the MC course I wanted to do didn't have the right timings for me. So I went, all right, I'll just do stand-up instead. It's a strange thought method, but it was really fun to do. And afterwards, I've got a big improv love, and my kind of clowning and character comedy side. So these different kind of buckets of comedy. And I wasn't quite sure if stand-up was for me. So I started, I came up with my 10 gigs method. I'm going to do 10 gigs. I'm going to use my same kind of set. I might tweak it a little bit, but I'm going to come off the stage and instinctively just mark it out of 10 and maybe write down a couple of reasons why I gave it that score and move on. And my first gig was really great. It was 8 out of 10. It was really energetic and it was lovely. My second gig was terrible. It was a 3 out of 10. And I remember sitting there in the front row being like, I don't want to be here. Afterwards, and kind of panicking on that. And it's a reflection both on and off the stage afterwards, that whilst you're on the stage, you're like, okay, people aren't feeling it today. You'll kind of learn to adapt and maybe change some stuff, maybe not. Maybe the improv kind of background can help you out there, and that all comes with practice. But then most importantly to me is the off the stage part. Is like, if that was a terrible gig and you really bombed, what was that? Did you bring different energy? Was the room not as kind of receptive? Did the act before you was a different level of energy to what you're coming on with? Maybe your set just didn't work today. All of these kind of reasons, and just kind of not like realizing why you're doing it to begin with is the fun, following that fun and to entertain people, rather than kind of beating yourself up and kind of spiraling down. But that's all where a lot of kind of a clowning training can come in, of just being okay with not not doing as well, and kind of learning and picking up on audience cues and things like that. And like we were saying before, the reading people types of things. So yeah, that's
Yes, so to add on to that, especially with the clown stuff, so just to say a little bit about clown comedy as well. I know we're talking a lot about improv comedy because that's the majority of the experience, well, the three of us have. For the last 6 years, I've been doing a lot of clown-based comedy, which isn't just red nose, face paint, lot of big shoes, that kind of thing. It's more like Mr. Bean style comedy, if anyone's familiar with that. Monty Python, the physicality of these kind of absurdist comedy is kind of what clowning is around. And I think clowning is much more specific to your question here about what to do when things go wrong and stuff. Because in clown comedy, instead of developing like a relationship with your scene partners, which you would do if you have multiple performers, the main thing clown performers are doing, and this is across all kinds of clowns, circus clown, children's entertainment clown, and clown for comedy, is it's a connection with the audience. You're trying to develop a very deep connection to the audience so that if they're enjoying what you're doing, you do more of that thing they're enjoying. And then you start trying to heighten it, develop it, and hopefully sustain it for more. But as soon as they start not enjoying what it is you're doing, that's your warning sign to be like, I need to change. I need to go back to something they were enjoying, or I need to try something new. And it's really fostering that connection. And that's something that's really emphasized more than any of the other forms of comedy and performance that I've seen is in clown. Develop that. And a lot of the training is about just being very aware. Are the audience enjoying this? Are they not enjoying this? Are they bored? Are they not bored? And what to do in those situations when they're not enjoying it. And a lot of the things to do in those situations, you either have things you've tried out beforehand, some things we call like saves. So your little like catchphrases or go-to actions. You might see this with stand-up comics a lot, when they might point out the obvious and say like, oh, well, that one didn't work. That's not going to make the Netflix special. And it's like a break of the tension, and they're showing vulnerability. I think a key thing with failure in these kind of performances is showing your vulnerability, showing your truth of who you are. It brings the audience back on your side, shows the relatableness, and it shows that you realize that this didn't work. And we know that as the audience. One of the worst things I think you can end up doing in these situations where things go wrong is plow on with your set, if you have a written set, regardless, or keep on doing the same thing that's not working, regardless of the fact that the audience aren't enjoying it. If they're not enjoying the first 2 minutes of your bad little bit, they're probably not going to enjoy the rest of it. So cut your losses and just try something else. Something joyous might come out of it. And especially in clown training, we go through techniques of how to kind of observe, like figure out that kind of stuff. I think in improv it can be a bit different. You just need to focus down on your scene partner and make things simple. Give yourself a bit more space and just connect a bit more. So, yeah.
Amazing, thank you. A lot of takeaways for me there. But Harpreet, I want to hear from you as well. So again, to sort of start with, what I want to know from you is, bad sets, when you're on there and it's not working, what do you do? How do you change it? What works for you, what doesn't?
Yeah, so I've not done stand-up, so I'm putting that out there. Maybe one day, who knows? Go away after this and start writing a set. So mostly done improv. I have done a bit of clown comedy, but what I've noticed is that in the past, when I've had like a bad improv comedy gig, it's usually because I'm so in my head. And there's a phrase that Tony Robbins says, like when you're in your head, you're dead. When you're in your heart, you're smart. But there's been these times when I'm on stage and you're in improv, you're in a group of other people, like your team. So there's usually about, let's say, typically 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people on stage at any one time. And I'm not listening to my scene partner. So for me, there's blocks to the presence of the moment. So I'm not listening to my scene partner. I'm thinking ahead. I'm trying to be funny. And I blurted out something random, which is completely not in context to what's happening. And it's just so awkward and it falls flat. So one of the best things that I was taught, actually, I don't know if you remember that the etchy sketch, like when you're a kid, you used to like draw, and then you like wipe it out. So one of the best tips I was told as a kind of a performer by an amazing improv teacher was to just imagine your brain as an etchy sketch before you go on stage. So you just kind of like, you just go completely blank before you go on stage, and then what you do is you kind of like say these kind of like affirmations, which Charlie was saying earlier on. I will support you on stage. You're looking at your scene partner. I will support you on stage. You don't have to be funny. You don't have to be clever, and it just takes away all that pressure of trying to be funny or trying to or not supporting your scene partner. So from learning from all of that that experience, there's kind of like a change of focus. You're not trying to be funny. The funniness is just arising in the moment from being with what's obvious. And yeah, so we use these different kind of premises to find the funny, to find the game in the scene, we call it, or to say sometimes the obvious thing is just the most funniest thing. And then personally, I go away and then reflect on my show and just look at, okay, what went well, what didn't go so well, what premises did I use in that show, what didn't I use, what did I love about other people's shows, and what could I, there's kind of like that reviewing process that I personally have as well, to kind of bring that into that next show as well. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. So here's where I'm at right now in my head in terms of what I want to ask next, which is the deep connection that you said with the audience. How do you build that? Because for me, some of the best comedians that I've seen, Dave Chappelle, for example, is one of my favorites. And not that because I find him the most hilarious person in the world. I'm sure there's people who write better jokes, but there's something about him that, I always feel like he's talking to the audience. I always feel like he's there with them. He's not on stage separate and people are just watching him. He's there with them. That's what I feel. And one other thing I feel with him is even if he's repeating jokes, he's still present with those jokes. So the people I've seen screw up personally, they've been people who've done a good joke and then they try to repeat it the next time as well, as if it's the same audience than before, and not taking into context that this is a new audience and something might need to be different within the same joke. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you build a deep connection, and does presence have, being present with the audience, what is how is that involved in building that deep connection?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of hard work, I think, is involved in understanding and building a connection with the audience, because essentially what you're doing is you're trying to empathize en masse with everybody who's in this collective entity, which is the audience, and really get the pulse of the room. I think knowing your material, which sounds ironic as an improviser, and all the solo stuff I do is mostly improvised as well, but knowing what you're doing, so whether it's improv and you're comfortable with the structure of you're doing, or you're just comfortable with your team or whatever it is, or if you're doing a performance or you're giving a talk, being so comfortable with your material that you can flex. You can move in and out of it, so that when you're seeing the audience and you're like, the energy feels lower, and you might recognize that by either having done those exercises and stuff beforehand, or reading rooms, or just being in a room, and you can often feel when an audience is dead in the water. If you're giving a talk at work or something like that, and people are checking their phones and stuff like that, feeling that the rooms needs a bit more energy. If you know your material, you can end up flexing around that, saying them in different ways, delivering it in different tones and stuff like that, or just going off for a little bit. If you've done improv practice, stuff like that, starting with a story that's got nothing to do with anything, but is just there to try and make people feel a bit more relaxed or at ease, or something like that, I think can really help. But yeah, you've just got to practice feeling what the audience is feeling, so that you can respond accordingly. So it's not easy, I don't think, to get to that kind of point, but it's definitely something that with practice can really help.
Yeah, and you see a lot of comedians, a lot of stand-up comedians particularly, come on stage and they say, I look like a person that X, and you kind of addresses something about how you look, how you stand, how you speak, and kind of gets your audience on side to be like, oh yes, I noticed that about that person, and you can kind of carry stuff through that way. It's also a lot of this. Say in improv, you'll come onto stage and you'll start your show off by interacting with the audience. You might be asking for suggestions of things that you can put on stage, or and you kind of, it depends how much what the format of your show is. So in improv, there's lots of different kind of formats of shows of how you kind of play different games or do different scenes. You might get suggestions of just one word, which is usually spatula or pineapple. If you've ever been to an improv show, someone will shout those things out. You might get life stories, you might replay those back. And it's that kind of audience interaction to begin with that can kind of settle you in and be like, we're here, you're in a safe space, we're going to give you a nice show now, and it's okay, and everything's going to be lovely. And it's that kind of setup, which you then see in kind of stand-ups, stand-up and clown, where that's the kind of job of the MC then, to read the room and see what is needed. And it's kind of showing that you're, especially like MCing, you're showing that you're strict, you don't want anyone talking in your show, you want people paying attention, but also you're a lovable person and you're here to have a lovely time. So it is a very kind of tricky balance. And we've had some very interesting shows MCing, especially around Christmas and a festive audience, when you're trying to play out those different kind of levels of please like me, but also please do as I say. So yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you, Harpreet.
Yeah. And I think in the improv world, it can be a bit easier than the stand-up world, because let's say the MC for the night, who's introducing the whole night, will come on stage, and there's so much interaction with every single member of the audience. It's like, okay, so welcome to the night. How many of you have seen improv before? Give me a noise. And then everyone's like feeling like they're involved. They're like shouting out. And how many of you haven't seen improv before? Make a noise. Or everyone now, let's play around. Everyone now just shout out your name or shout out your favorite dinosaur. So everyone's kind of involved. Everyone's in as one at the beginning. And then, like Viki says, then one improv team will come on, and there's always usually a bit of banter with the audience. So it kind of feels like you're almost at one with the audience to a certain extent, and especially with certain members, if you have a bit of a chat with them, you might have a little 2-minute conversation with one member of the audience to find out a bit about their day or what they had for breakfast, and that becomes what we improvise. And I think just by connecting with that one person in the audience, you feel like you've connected with the whole audience, or they've connected with you. There's that kind of like, that thing that happens with improv. I also remember I did one clowning work, like 6-week course, and I remember this exercise we had to do whereby we were off stage, and the teacher would have this drum. The clown teachers always have this drum. He beat his drum, and you'll come in off stage, and your only job is there's like a little tennis ball in the middle of the room, and your only job is to try and come in and pick that tennis ball up and get to the other side of the room. But you're kind of having to do that based on how the audience enjoys you doing that. So how are you moving? How are you walking? How are you going to pick up that ball? Are they enjoying that? If they're enjoying that, do more of what they enjoyed. If they didn't enjoy that, you actually have to go backwards and leave the room and do it all over again. So these different exercises you can use to be more connected to the audience. And I think just being like, when I'm on stage, I am trying to support my scene partner, but sometimes you're listening you're always listening into what gets a laugh maybe, or what they like. So we do in improv is what's called a callback. So we might bring in something that the audience found funny and bring that into another scene, and a character that they loved, or a word or phrase that they loved, and we bring it back and call it back, and that there's that connection with the audience, I think, when we do things like that as well.
So I just want to pick up. I really like what Harpreet was saying. The exercise with the tennis ball is a classic clown exercise, and it's really fun. And as Harpreet was saying, you can only go pick up the tennis ball and leave the stage if you think the audience like you being on stage. However, there's so much fun in failure and vulnerability that you get so many performers who are there by the entrance of the stage and are just moving backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And they are the funniest people. They never complete the exercise. But one, very few people complete the exercise anyway. But two, these people never even get to the ball, yet they're the most joyous performers who are connecting with the audience because they're showing their failure, they're showing their vulnerability. And when they do succeed, they're sharing their success and stuff with us. So I think something that can really help connect in with the audience is showing how you feel. It's being authentic and relatable. So if it's going a bit bad, recognizing that and changing tacks. If it's going well, showing that you're pleased, you're laughing with us. You always see comedians laughing at their own jokes when they're going well. But a comedian laughing at their own jokes when it's not going well, no. That is a big disconnect with the audience right there. So yeah, so just to add to that, showing that vulnerability and authenticity, I think really helps that connection.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because that's kind of what I believe. If you want to connect with another person in general, you start with vulnerability, and it prompts them to open up as well. So it makes a lot of sense, and it just sounds so much fun. Like, honestly, I feel like I want to be a part of that. I'm just visualizing everything that you said. I'm like, okay, how would I pick up that tennis ball? So that's really cool. And we've got a few comments from Marlena. Have a read. This sounds fun. So I love what you've said about connecting with the audience. If you focus on them, not yourself, you will get a much better result. One of my favorite love comedy moments are impromptu conversations with the audience.
Yeah,
and then
there's some really lovely performers that just do audience interaction. So my current favorite show, I have seen it twice, is an artist called Julia Masley. So her show is just audience interaction. She just wants to solve your problems, and it's beautiful. She says it's not a comedy, it's very funny, and you come out of there and you feel so wholesome and lovely, and the world is a beautiful place with beautiful people. She makes connections between all these strangers in the room. She just solves problems. I don't want to say too much more about it, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's so good as an example of really understanding the audience, because she's getting genuine problems from the audience. Sometimes those problems are very difficult or sensitive subjects, and the way that she handles them and respects them is just beautiful. And it just shows that these kind of shows that, as you say, she doesn't call it a comedy show. I would call it a comedy show because it always ends up being amazingly funny, but it doesn't have to always be about comedy. And the most beautiful moments I've seen in the shows we've seen of that are some of the ones that weren't the comedy moments and stuff. And it all comes from that connection and the vulnerability and showing that and respecting the audience's boundaries and stuff like that.
Yeah. I've got so much to. I really want to dive into this world, but Harpreet, also, please, your comments on this comment.
Yeah, thanks, Marlena. Like one of my favorite comedians is a guy called Ross Noble. He's been around for like 20-25 years. Guy from Newcastle, Geordie. He's got long hair. He's really big in Australia, New Zealand as well as the UK. But literally almost all of his show, or at least half of his show, is fully audience interaction. He's just going around and he's like, oh, you've got this funny look about you. Oh, that's an interesting hat, and there's a kind of ad-libbing that happens. And what I kind of really got about Marlena's comment is that what I notice about what comics are doing there is that there's a change of focus. Like it's no longer about bringing the ego in, or it's not about us. The focus isn't about us as a comic making jokes and getting people's laugh and getting significance and validation. For me, I noticed there's a switch of focus there. There's a focus on for me, for instance, in improv comedy, there's a focus on my scene partner instead of trying to make me be the hero of the scene, or as stand-ups or other comics, there's a focus on being there with the person in the audience. So I think there's a quite nice subtle shift. Instead of focusing it on us, which brings in the ego and our limiting beliefs and our need for validation, by focusing on the audience or focusing on someone else or focusing on the end result of this scene being fun and playful and joyous, it just switches everything, because where our focus goes, energy flows, and that kind of thing. So I think a switch in that whole focus switches the whole energy in a show.
That's really cool, because I'm kind of relating this to sports. So I play a lot of football, and especially because it's got a lot to do with the team. And one thing that I find works really well for me is that if you know the skill and the talent of the other person, and then I go to myself, okay, how can I adjust myself or my positioning to make their talents stand out, and so that that would then serve the whole team. So that's how I'm relating it. Is that what you're saying? Does that make sense?
That really connects with an exercise that I love doing in improv, which is where you get a handful of people up, maybe 4 or 5 people up, and you get each of them to say the thing they enjoy most in improv. They're just most fun they ever have. And then we just see a series of scenes where each person, your only job is that whoever else is in your scene, there'll be 2 people in the scene, you're trying to do the thing that they love, just that thing that they really, really enjoy. And you get the most joyous scenes come out of it. And often there's scenes they're very often funny scenes, but often there's scenes that aren't funny, but they're just so fun and beautiful, because you just see how much enjoyment this performer is having, and they're sharing it with us. And I think it's the generosity in improv. As Harpreet was saying, in improv, you focus on your scene partner. It's like if everyone in improv comedy is trying to make their scene partner have the best day ever, look like the best, but everyone's doing that, everyone's going to have the best day. And I feel like that's a strong staple of improv comedy, and a strong staple of clown comedy is you're having that love and attention, but directing it mostly towards the audience and making sure that they have the best time. And as with all forms of comedy, there's overlap. So in improv, it's good to have that focus on the audience as well. And in clown, it's good to have the focus on your scene partners as well as the audience. There's obviously a balance going on. But yeah, that generosity of spirit, I think, is crucial.
Yeah, that is so cool. Thank you for sharing that one. Marlena has a second comment that she's written right after this one. So I do a lot of public speaking and reading, and interacting with the audience is key to a good performance. I've noticed a lot of similarities between what you've said and public speaking. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. And yeah, thank you guys for sure. Like, I'm loving this. And I'm sure, because I can see the parallels in just me having a conversation with someone, and what you've been saying. So I do see it applying to many places, even in sport, as I said, which is crazy to think. So yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. One last question before I kind of want to do an exercise with you guys. Well, I want you to do one with us. I just want to see what it looks like in real life. But one last question is about structure, because I'm kind of obsessed with setting things up. Like, how do you set things up for success? So is there a process that you follow? Is there a structure? Is there a system that you follow before going into a show, or before starting a show? It's like, for example, if do you have an end result? Hey, today we want to get the audience to feel this one particular emotion, or this is the end result today. How do you set up for it? Do you have some systems, some structures, some thought processes in place to get that result?
Harpreet, do you wanna?
Yeah, like there's usually an end result on fun and play, because that changes our focus. There is also, we do have rehearsals as improvisers as well, and so we rehearse, maybe characters, or what we say, to start a scene, we talk about having a structure of getting the who, what, and the where. So, okay, two people are coming on stage. Who are they? Are they a mother and a son? Are they a boss, a colleague? Where are we? Are we in an office? Are we in a garden? Are we in a library? What are we talking about? So there's usually a structure, and we ground the scene in the who, what, where. This is giving away some secrets. So there is a structure in terms of that, and then once you've kind of got a structure of the who, what, where in an improv scene, then you can take it to a lot of different places. We usually take it to absurd town and take it to crazy, silly things. But once you've got that basis of, okay, who's in the scene, where you are, and your scene partner does, and the audience does, and you can make it really obvious as well. You can be like, oh, hey, best friend Dave, we're at school today. Let's play this game. So you can be really obvious, so the audience knows in 10 seconds, and your scene partner, everyone's on board. You know where you are and what you're doing and who you are. You've got that structure, and I think by having that structure, then you can take it to many different places to expand on who you are and why you know each other and why you're in this library. Or so by having that structure, that really helps. And by focusing on, for me, we tend to focus on fun and play in scenes as well.
Yeah. So exactly what Harpreet said. I like to before any gig, I like to listen to some upbeat music to kind of get me like switched into I'm going to a gig. And before that, when I kind of get there and meet with my improv team, the improv show in particular, doing some warm-ups that kind of get you out of your head, into your body, into that kind of the present moment. Whilst you're performing improv, you actually can hit a flow state. There's been wonderful brain scans of improvisers improvising, and it's kind of turning on all of those flow states. And having some really interesting warm-ups of kind of something to be physical, something to be a bit more wordy, and practice those who, what, where Harpreet mentioned, and then something to just get you all aligned. You might have little things that say, tonight I'd like to be very physical, or tonight I'd like to do more scenes with you because we never do scenes together. And you might have little kind of missions that you might have. You might not. You might just be like, I'm just here to have fun. And it's those kind of things.
Yeah, so I definitely double down on everything that you guys just said. Like the importance of warm-ups just before any kind of performance or rehearsal. Performance. I think it's so crucial. There's clear differences between the shows that go well and the shows that go less well, and it's normally the warm-ups and the energy in the room and the warm-ups and stuff like that. So having really knowing, and I think this applies to things like public speaking and any kind of things where you're put on the spot, is knowing those things that make you comfortable, whether it's putting on crazy dance, heavy music, or whatever that is beforehand, or whether there's a warm-up you do with your group. Maybe it's a vocal warm-up you do by yourself before a musical or public speaking engagement, or whether it's a group warm-up or whatever, is so crucial. Another technique that I find really useful, because when you're performing in any context, there's a lot going on. You've got an audience, you've got your material, or you're making things up. There's a lot going on. You don't want too much in your brain. Rehearsal is the time for overthinking and making loads and loads of mistakes and really experimenting. When you're on stage, you want a lot of those thoughts to go away. So I never recommend having any more than one intention as you're performing. And one nice way of doing this, if you know there's a bunch of different stuff you want to be improving on, maybe it's with my performance, it might be character, it might be generosity, it might be connecting with the audience, loads of these things, but I'm only going to think of one of these at a time, is have these written all on cards. Get a blank deck of playing cards, have all the things that you want to be working on one of those, and then just draw one at the start of each show and be like, this is my sole intention for this gig. And then when you're done with that, put it on the bottom so that you get through the rest of the deck, or however you want to manage it. But that can be quite a handy way of still feeling like you're working on the many different skills and things that there are to work on and play with, but without giving yourself too much to get into that overthinky place.
That is really cool because, again, bringing it back to football, it's very relevant to me because I'm trying to improve. So I'm going to trainings and doing all of these things, and there's just too much that I want to improve on. And for the last few weeks, at least, what's been happening is I'm trying to do too much. Like I'm going into one position and then I'm trying to go into another one because that requires a different set of skills, and it's just kind of all over the place. And that is such a good idea to just pick one, because that's kind of like that's exactly what I do when I'm writing as well. It's always about one thing. Just focus on one thing and let it out from there, and it just makes life easy, comfortable. Flow comes from there for me. And yeah, creativity as well. It fits about that one thing. So thank you. And Harpreet, there's one thing that you said about even telling the audience this is what it's about, or this is what's happening, or this is who the character is. That's so I'm kind of obsessed with movies, and especially structurally, what happens when, and what is the sequence of the things that happens. And generally what you'll find in the best movies is that they tell the audience what the objective is. It's like in the Matrix, hey Neo, you're the one, and you have to go find your way to it, or you have to believe it yourself, and then you'll become the one. So the whole journey is about him believing in himself and becoming the one. And that's in any movie. And what you'll find in the movies that don't communicate what the objective is, you're just left confused. It's like, what are they trying to achieve? What is this whole thing about?
That reminds me of excellent comedy performer and teacher Elf Lyons. I'm going to completely butcher this quote or lesson in some way, but the ethos of it, when you're building a kind of longer show, like a 40, 50-minute show, is tell the audience what you're going to do. Tell them again what it is. Start doing that thing. Tell them that you're doing that thing. And when you're done, tell them that you did that thing. Just you can't hammer it home enough. And setting up that expectations, especially if you're playing in the realm of abstract or alternative theatre or comedy and stuff, where what you're doing is very strange. You just can't be clear enough, and it's the holding the hands of the audience. It's bringing them on board and letting them know it's okay to come along on this journey with you.
That is so interesting. I never expected that to be here because, again, bringing up the example of the Matrix, that's what it begins with. It's like, hey, you begin with the movie, hey, you're the one. We believe you're the one. And then midway is like, you're the one, but maybe not in this life. And at the end, oh, he's become the one. They literally say it, spell it out for the people. And that is so interesting to see that works in real life as well. So amazing. All right, guys, we don't have much time, but I would really like, for myself at least, and for the audience, is if you could, teach me an exercise, if you could teach me something that will bring me in the present, that will sort of open me up in my expression. Did you guys have something? Is there something that you can share?
Absolutely. Firstly, Harpreet, did you have anything? We've got some ideas.
Just one basic idea was the infinity box idea, just the very basic. But yeah, let's hear also what you guys. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, we were thinking of basic, literally a yes and exercise to show the power of collaboration and agreement, or like wise words as a nice way of closing with a wise statement.
Yeah.
All right. Is that?
Yeah, let's do wise words to close with a wise statement. So the way this works is it's what we call a word at a time game or exercise. So I'm going to go clockwise in the order I'm seeing on the screen at the moment. So Harpreet, me, Viki, Arush. So, and then it'll keep on going round and round like that until we feel like we're done. So we're going to say a wise saying, something like the grass is always greener on the other side. Something like that, but we're going to be making one up. So it's not a common saying. And it's going to go one word at a time. So Harpreet might say, the grass is always greener on the other side, etc. When we get to the end, we all go wise. And that was it. So I think we have exactly enough time to get one of these in. We can go more than once if we haven't finished the sentence. So Harpreet, would you like to start us up?
Always
get
your
best
suit.
Wise. I think maybe one more for good luck.
Yeah, let's do one more.
Be profound. Always get your best suits. It's. I think the ethos of that message is feel comfortable in yourself. Let's get one more in. Harpreet, kick us off.
The
way
to
be
in
yourself
is
to always
be
yourself. So wise. And I think sometimes the beauty with those kind of exercises is there's statements you're saying are either stupid or obvious, but there's something joyous in discovering it together that still makes it entertaining and fun, even if you look back at it and it's like, that's not a funny statement. But in the moment when we're discovering that, it's joyful.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, if I look at it from my sort of, overperforming perspective, I'm like, those are the shittiest words I could have used, to make something funny. I'm like, come on, man, but it worked.
It works. That was fun.
Yeah. So, and that is perfectly on time, guys. So thank you so much for joining us here, giving us your energy, giving us so much wisdom. Really appreciate it. And please feel free to tell people where to find you, what your website is, what is it that you're, serving the world with, what offerings do you have? Please feel free to share.
Cool. So you can find us at playface.fun is our website name, and Playface Comedy on all of the socials. And we do workshops and courses based in London, as well as shows and community events as well.
And I'm an intuitive life and business coach. I do something called the Intuitive Business Academy, and I'm also a greatness coach for people who want to find their greatness or to get rid of those blocks which are getting away from their greatness or living in their hearts. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you again, guys, for showing up, sharing your wisdom, giving us your energy. That is very generous. Really appreciate it. And hopefully see you guys very, very soon again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suresh.
Thank you, guys. See you.
Bye.
And